Hey everybody, welcome back to Moving Forward. I'm Jennifer J. I'm so glad you're joining me again today. I am going to be having a lot of scripture if you want to get a pen and paper to write things down. I'm not going to read them to you today because there are a lot of them, but I'll let you look those up, and I will try to link the sermon to the video so that you can watch it if you want. But it's going to be a sermon by Pastor Rick George at New Life Community Church in Gardner, Kansas, and it's called Why Do You Doubt? Why do you doubt? And so the first thing he said is that doubt is not the opposite of faith. Doubt is not the opposite of faith. And I thought that was pretty interesting. So I was like, okay, if doubt's not the opposite of faith, then what is? He said the opposite of faith is certainty. The opposite of faith is certainty. If you're certain, you don't need faith, right? So some scriptures that we're going to look at today, Matthew chapter 14, verses 27 through 31. This is about Peter, when Peter doubted. John chapter 20, verses 24 through 29, and this is about when Thomas doubted. Many of you have heard of Doubting Thomas, and we're going to talk about him a little bit today. We're going to rename him. And then John the Baptist in Matthew 11, verses 2 and 3, we're going to talk about when John the Baptist doubted. So when Pastor Rick said doubt is not the opposite of faith, he said it's a doorway to the opportunity for a deeper faith. So doubt is a doorway. That was good. There's a book called Room for Doubt by Ben Young. He recommended, and I would recommend that to you guys. But if you look in those scriptures, Jesus asked why they doubted. He didn't shame them for doubting. He said, why do you doubt? He was trying to get to the why, right? He was trying to get them to understand and to come into a deeper faith. So he said, doubt is a normal part of the faith journey. Doubt is normal. You guys aren't weird. Sometimes we doubt and we think we're the only ones, or we think we must not have enough faith if we're doubting. But doubt is a normal part of the faith journey. In John 11:16, Thomas is doubting, and he's saying, they're in the upper room, right? And Jesus had already risen from the dead, and he appears to the 12. Well, he appears to the 11 because Thomas wasn't there. Judas wasn't there either. So, okay, he appeared to the 10. But Thomas said, when they told him that they saw Jesus, he's like, I'm not going to believe unless I stick my fingers in his hands and my hand in his side. And then days later, when he appeared again and Thomas was there this time, he said, come here, Thomas, and stick your fingers in my wounds and stick your hand in my side. He didn't want him to doubt. But Pastor Rick said Thomas shouldn't be called Doubting Thomas because he was courageous. He was a warrior. He was committed to Jesus. He still met with the other apostles, right? And even after he died, he stuck with them. He didn't run off. But he doubted. He had some doubts. And so he said, what if your life was surmised with nicknames of something you did that was negative? So Thomas has always been called Doubting Thomas ever since then, right? We call him Doubting Thomas. But what if our life what if that was our nickname? Think of something negative you've done, something you've done that people know about that's just not something you would like to be called. And so it's not very kind of us, I guess, right? To call him Doubting Thomas. He had a lot of good qualities. But we experience doubt when God doesn't answer the prayer the way that we thought he should, or the way that we thought he would. And then we doubt. And Jesus asked why, even on the cross. Why have you forsaken me? Doubt is not the same as unbelief. Doubt is not the same as unbelief. A willful resistance to God is unbelief. A willful denying him. That's willful resistance, denying him. That's unbelief. That's a choice. Unbelief is a heart issue, right? It's here. Doubt is a mind issue. So trying to make sense of what doesn't make sense is when we doubt. We're trying to make sense of what doesn't make sense. So Jesus meets us in our doubt, though. He pulled Peter out of the water when Peter tried to walk on the water, and then he doubted and he, started to sink, and Jesus pulled him out. He sent word to John the Baptist when John the Baptist is in prison for having preached the gospel, preaching about Jesus, and he sends his messengers to Jesus to say, is he really the Christ? Is he really the Messiah? Is he really the one? And he showed, and he sends word to John that he is the one. And he showed Thomas the wounds. Put your hand in my hand, right? So he meets us in our doubt. In Jeremiah 29, verses 12 through 14, he says he will listen and he will be found by us. So he's listening when we speak. He's listening to us. And if you seek reassurance, he will give it to you. He will give it to you. If that's what you're seeking, he will give it to you. So don't believe the lies. That came to me. That wasn't something Pastor said, but many times throughout my journey from Kansas to Arizona, it's been brought up in lots of other sermons about not believing the lies of the devil. And that's what that made me think of, is if we're doubting, we can't believe the lies, because Satan is sure going to try and get a foothold. But he also said you can't isolate yourself. You have to look for evidence of him in your life. And what is one thing I've told you guys about how you can find evidence of him in your life? One thing you can do is write things down, right? You got to keep a journal. And the reason is you can remember what he's done in the past when you go back through that and you read it and you read what your prayer requests were and you know how he answered those things. Then that's evidence of him, right? So we have to look for evidence in our life. And then what are your doubts producing? Because faith grows when we open our hearts to the truth. But doubt's going to produce something too. So we've got to shift. It's a doorway, but we can't stay in the doorway, right? And something else I've always told you guys, if you're not moving forward, what are you doing? You're moving backward. So we can't stay in the doorway, right? We can't stay in that doubt. We have to look for evidence of him and move forward. So that's how our faith will grow. And you can read Luke 24, verses 32 through 34, because God does speak in miraculous ways, but he also speaks in our quiet times. He speaks to us in prayer. He speaks to us through his word. He speaks to us through our circumstances, through other people. So faith doesn't require certainty. It requires trusting him in spite of the uncertainty, right? That's faith. Peter went on to be a powerful preacher and leader. So he had doubt, but he still did marvelous things for the Lord. Thomas was changed and became a faithful and powerful disciple. So you'll remember that there were 2 disciples on the road that were filled with joy and faith because of witnesses who shared what they knew. When we believe a lie, we reject the truth. But when we share that truth with others, they get to share in that joy with us. And so we need to remember to do that. And so when we share just what we know, it doesn't have to be a lot, you guys. It can be a tiny little bit. It can be only what you've heard here today. But if we share that little bit that we believe with a smile on our face and joy in our heart, someone else is going to want that in their life. Someone else is going to want that joy as well. And you are going to produce and multiply disciples by simply sharing what you know. What has Jesus done for you? Just make it personal. What has he done for you? It could be anything. You might think it's small. You might think this doesn't matter. Nobody cares. But look, I'm just a little girl from Kansas, the Midwest of the United States. And I would have never dreamed that I would write a book that is now on several bestseller lists as well as in bookstores. It's not just online, it's in bookstores. I never would have dreamed that I would be on a YouTube channel in 73 countries that have viewed my videos, as well as 33 languages. Never in my wildest dreams, you guys. But I'm simply obeying God, doing what he has told me to do. And he takes that and he multiplies it. Like the little boy with the 2 fish. or 2 loaves. He just blesses it and multiplies it, right? And we have to trust him for that. So take what you know today. Take what you've learned. Take something Jesus has done for you and share it with somebody else, because it will make a difference and it will multiply in the kingdom. And so I look forward to hearing from you and finding out how you're sharing and what God's doing with what you're sharing. Please do make a comment and let me know. I would love to hear about it. All right, until next time, have a beautiful week. Bye-bye.